Season 17, or Season of the Spooky Scary Stuff, is finally here, and with it came some big changes, more notably the Solar rework. It received quite a few upgrades, so today we're going to do a breakdown of what the Titan changes are, what everything does, along with covering all the new damage and healing values. That's right, us Titans don't just eat crayons, we like information too, so get your Cheeto dust ready because we're about to get nerdy. Hello my fellow weirdos, how are you today? I'm glad to finally have my voice back so I can talk to you in a video, but just in case it kinda goes out halfway through, I apologize. So far, the Solar rework has been a blast to use, and I'm liking the changes from how it works all the way up to the new perks in the form of aspects and fragments. It finally got the much needed love it deserves, and everyone seems to like it, but I have been seeing a lot of questions on the forums, Twitter, and everywhere else you can imagine surrounding the new subclass. I'm hoping I can help a little bit by answering some of those questions in this video. I do want to let you know up front, this is not a build video and we won't be going over every fragment. I don't want the video to get too convoluted with information. We will be covering values, a few changes, and how everything works in PvE. That's about it. So without wasting any of your time, let's get into it already. The first thing we should probably talk about is the new subclass descriptions, or keywords. When we hover over an aspect, fragment, or ability, we get a pop-up that explains what they're called and what they do, but they don't actually give us any information, which has always annoyed me because I like information. The keywords are Cure, Radiant, Restoration, Scorch, and Ignition. These apply to all three classes of Guardians, but let's be real here, we're more interested in Titans. Cure's description reads, "You are healed in a burst of mending light." What this means is, we receive an instant 60 HP burst of healing, and this can be applied by picking up the baby throwing hammer after causing damage, or by the healing grenade, and there doesn't seem to be a cooldown on it either. I kept throwing my hammer at a champion, and I felt like an overload captain consistently healing. Oh, how the tables have turned. I do want to mention that sometimes Cure doesn't show up on the bottom left corner of the screen because we have too many buffs going on at the same time, but I assure you it is working. The next one is Radiant. This is somewhat the replacement for the Sun Warrior perk that Titans used to have on the bottom tree. The description reads, "Our weapons are enhanced by the power of the Traveler and deals increased damage to foes." What this really means is that it grants us a 25% weapon damage buff for 10 seconds, and the timer can be extended through fragments. Currently, we have a few ways to extend the Radiant buff, but only one way to actually get it in the first place, which kinda bothers me because one of the best parts of using the bottom tree was the consistent damage buff from standing in sunspots. Now, we have to get it from a teammate, or equip the fragment Ember of Torches and use a powered melee to activate Radiant. I almost feel like Bungie took some of the Solar Titan's identity away with this one. The third keyword is Restoration. This description reads, "You regenerate health and shields over time. Cannot be interrupted by taking damage." This one gives us 50 HP of healing per second for 5 seconds at base with 1 stack, and 80 HP per second with 2 stacks. The timer can be extended by 50% through various fragments, or by walking out of and back into a sunspot. In my humble opinion, the healing is fun, but overkill. I have died twice since the season started, and that was only because a Phalanx shot me across the map with its shield. This is definitely going to make for some very spicy tank builds. The next one is Scorch. This one reads, "The target is singed by destructive solar light, taking damage over time. Scorch damage increases as the target accumulates more Scorch stacks. After enough Scorch stacks are applied, they ignite." Scorch stacks have a threshold of 100 like most things in the game, with the only difference being supers and abilities cause different amounts of stacks. Once the enemy reaches a total of 100 stacks, the ignition is applied, and depending on what aspect and fragments we use, can change how fast an enemy reaches 100 stacks. A good example would be if an enemy walked through our sunspot. This would apply 5 stacks of Scorch per tick, but if we were to use the Consecration melee, this will apply 40 stacks of Scorch to the affected target on the initial melee, and when we activate the second melee, it instantly applies the rest of the stacks needed to proc Ignition, which is why we get the big explosion from Consecration. And this brings me to the last keyword, Ignition. This description reads, "A large solar explosion that deals damage in an area around the target." I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit confused with this one. I'm still doing a lot of testing because I'm getting different damage numbers depending on what type of enemy it is and how we activate the ignition, but I'm assuming this is scalable. For instance, when I used the Consecration and activated both melees, I would get 4,338 3 times on the initial hit, which is normal. but then I would get a yellow damage number for 36,144 on the ignition, and another number for 50,601. I'm assuming the yellow damage number is the ignition because when I activated it a different way, I got another yellow damage number of 54,215, and this is all on the same enemy without any other buffs or debuffs, so I'm not sure what's happening. It's almost acting like the Peregrine Greaves where the numbers seem to be all over the place unless I'm misunderstanding or doing something wrong. All I can say is it does some great damage, but if there's anybody out there who can give me some insight on this one, I will gladly give you a virtual hug or pretend to send you nudes. Back off, Andreas. Let's talk aspects. Currently, we have 3 called Consecration, Sol Invictus, and Roaring Flames. Consecration is a 2-step charge melee ability that works by activating the first melee while sliding, which launches us into the air and creates a wave of solar energy that travels 17.5 meters forward, applies 40 stacks of Scorch, and deals 40 damage. While we're in the air, we can hit the melee again to slam ourselves onto the ground, which creates a second wider wave of solar energy that travels 14.5 meters, deals 120 damage, and automatically procs ignition to enemies affected by Scorch. This comes in really handy if we have a good ability spam build because it keeps knocking enemies back or just flat out kills them, and the ignition part synergizes well with a few of the fragments. Something else this aspect doesn't mention is that it uses half of our melee for the first initial wave, and the other half for the second wave. If we just want to scorch an enemy, we can use only half of our melee and not the second half. This will leave 50% to go towards the second charge, but come on, who's not going to use the whole thing? We are Titans after all. The next aspect is Sol Invictus. This is a returning perk with a few changes. When we get kills on scorched enemies, solar ability kills, or just the impact from Hammer of Sol, it creates a sunspot. When we run through or stand in the sunspots, this aspect grants restoration and increases our base grenade and melee ability regeneration by 150%. Sol Invictus only lasts 5 seconds if we just run through the sunspot, but if we stand in it, the sunspot will last 20 seconds, and once the sunspot is gone, Sol Invictus timer will run down from 5. So this means we can get a total of 25 seconds toward faster ability regen. This pairs nicely with Laurely Splendor and Phoenix Cradle. And the last aspect is Roaring Flames. This one grants us up to 3 stacks of Roaring Flames from solar ability kills or ignition kills, and each stack increases ability damage by 20% for 20 seconds, and 13% in PvP. I don't know why I wanted to put that in there. It's pretty much the same as it used to be, with the exception of activating from ignition kills now. So far, I'm really happy with all the changes to the subclass itself, except for the Sun Warrior damage buff removal. That one makes me a little mad if you couldn't tell, but I'm still looking forward to playing around with some of the builds and seeing how far we can take this new subclass, or break it. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't want to make this video too convoluted or too long, so I'm not going to cover the fragments, but I would like to talk about a few small exotic armor changes I've noticed. The first one is Laurely Splendor. This is one of my most used exotics because we have a sunspot on demand, but with the recent changes, it no longer grants us the 25% damage buff I keep going on about, like Sun Warrior used to give us. The healing has also been changed as well. We no longer get constant healing while standing in the sunspot after popping our barricade. Instead, we receive a ×2 restoration for 5 seconds at base, but we can keep refreshing it by walking in and out of a sunspot. The other exotic I've noticed that received a small rework is the Phoenix Cradle. It used to make Sun Warrior last twice as long and grant Sun Warrior to our teammates. It still makes Sol Invictus last twice as long, but now they get restoration as well. I don't really see a downside to this one except for the missing damage buff, again. I know I threw a ton of information at you, and if you're anything like me, then you probably forgot half of it already. The good news is, there are 2 amazing community members who bust their booty to bring us all the info you could ever need, ranging from how loud a Titan fart is to stacking and debuffing to make the most out of any loadout. They go by the names Court and Pippin. Their spreadsheets have always been a big help for all the videos I make by giving some guidance on my testing. I will leave links in the description, but I must warn you, they are still testing everything for the new season, so the spreadsheets might be under construction. If you would like me to do a fragment breakdown somewhat like this video, let me know in the comment section and I'll get to testing everything out. If you found this video helpful, a like would be awesome, but more importantly, be true to yourself, be good to one another, and have a fantastic day. Thank you!
And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. I don't fucking take smoke, I'ma poke a hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude, crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently, thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty.